Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Elena Bensonoff, and she's here to share with us her new book, Holistic Wisdom. Elena is a pioneer in the field of functional, regenerative, and energy medicine who's been sharing her gifts of healing for over 20 years. She founded wholistic.com and helps people all over the world find balance and vitality with her services and products. Elena is a clinical pharmacist, acclaimed artisan perfumer with an award-winning natural skincare line, and an American Board of Anti-Aging Health Practitioner. So let's welcome to the show, Elena Bensonoff.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to share my message and to be together with you at this day. Thank you.
Well, what a delight it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. I loved your new book. Diving into it, it has so much information. I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, thank you, first of all, for sharing that you love the book. What inspired me? This is a collection probably of over 20 years of my work. I felt that it was time, because over the years, people would come into my practice seeking a healer, right? Seeking someone that can give them an answer, which I could definitely provide. But I found out that actually the healer that people are seeking are themselves. And it was time for me to give this information to people. And there are very specific things that every single human being has the ability to tap into and find out and actually help themselves feel better. So therefore, the inspiration of my book came from all of the people that I was working with over the years seeking the advice.
Well, I think that's so important because a lot of times people do want to get to a point where they feel self-empowered to make these changes in their life.
Definitely. Definitely. And that is, I feel, is the biggest paradigm shift that we're living through at the moment, is recognizing that the power is within each and every one of us, and it's not outside of ourselves. And therefore, the message is, you can seek. A lot of people are seeking for the cure, but really it's not about the cure. It's about the healing process itself. And that takes place inside of ourselves.
Well, in your book, you start right off with gut health. Why did you choose to start there?
Yes. So, again, it's based on years and years of experience. So first, I'd like to break it down into three parts, the body, mind, and soul. And I look at the mind as the CEO, if you want to look at the company, right? Running a company. So in order for the company to be run efficiently and focus on the vision and mission, which is the soul aspect, right? It's very difficult to do that if there's chaos throughout the employees. And what I call the employees are actually the organ systems in our body, in our physical body. So when there's chaos or the inflammation, it's impossible to focus on higher vision. So where does the chaos begin? In the gut. And therefore I begin with gut health, because this is where most people come with very clear symptoms, right? Bloating, gas, skin rashes, congestion, all of it is linked to the gut. So I felt that it was very important to give people the information that's needed to heal their own gut, to get in tune with their own gut and understand it in order to feel better, right? To connect later on to the emotional well-being and then to move on to the soul aspects of who we are.
Well, I appreciate you touching on that, because I think a lot of people, they don't realize how important gut health is to overall body health. And you touched on a few things. What are some of the other signs that our gut is in desperate need of health?
Oh, gosh. Fatigue, brain fog, skin rashes. A lot of people suffer from sinusitis, or just, I would say, unexplained or any chronic condition or any kind of mystery symptom. I would always say begin with the gut. And if you're uncertain, and that would lead you to understanding yourself better, because it ultimately is asking for you to reevaluate your entire pattern system, which is what are you eating, right? What are you applying on your skin? how are you reacting, right, or with other people or interacting, because stress also will impact our gut health. So all those things are definitely play a major role in our overall well-being. So for those people who are suffering from any kind of mystery symptoms, it's definitely a great place to begin.
Well, that's very encouraging because they can look at that and go, gosh, okay, I need to make some adjustments here. And your book goes over some really good information on how to make those changes and to really help support our liver.
Yes. Yeah. So liver is one of the major detox organs. It's also linked, not only does it detoxify chemicals, right, and toxins from our system, it's also detoxifying emotions, blocked emotions. So I always say that if your liver is acting up, always look inside as far as your emotional hygiene, right? How are you processing? Are you blocking things? Are you not wanting to deal with things? And one of the best tools that we have is our physical body. It's actually the most incredibly powerful tool that we have, because it's through our body that we're able to tap in to see what's really happening. And when we choose to ignore our feelings and emotions, what happens is our body is letting us know with much louder messages, and that would be physical symptoms. And then, of course, if we choose to ignore those long enough, they turn into full-blown illness or chronic conditions.
In your book, you talk about the emotional aspect. I'm glad you touched on it because I do want to kind of dive in that a little bit more. You talk about the spiral of emotions. I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yes. So I would say the key, years ago when I was doing research and just seeing, where are most of our health conditions coming from? And I was really surprised to find out that 65% of our emotions are actually negative, or thoughts are negative. And, to me, the root cause of any imbalance is emotional imbalance, right? So, yes, we do experience, sadness, and it's healthy to experience sadness. We go through, frustrations and anger, but it's important to acknowledge all of the emotions that come up for us, because they're very powerful messengers for us to kind of be able to tune in and grow and help us expand, versus blocking them and storing them somewhere in our body, in our system. And what happens is when we store them in our cells, in our system, our body has a very intelligent design, because it will always respond in the same way unless we choose to rewire it. So therefore, I created the spiral of emotions, showing to people that you can actually raise your vibration, and from lower vibrational states, right, such as anger, hatred, doubt, being a victim, right? So many people that I've worked with over the years, feel like they're the victims of their condition, of their circumstances. But ultimately, it's embracing those emotions and saying, okay, what are you here to teach me? How can I grow from this situation? And then raising yourself up into the state of peace, into the state of love, joy, right? Positivity, because that will ultimately have a positive impact on our overall well-being.
What are some ways that people can kind of do an emotional self-testing to see where they're at the present moment?
Well, there's several ways. One of the best ways is to give yourself, I would say, at least 10 minutes a day to tune in, to silence everything, wherever you are. You could be laying down, you could be in your car just sitting down, your car parked, or just take yourself in any space that is quiet. Tune in, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, how am I feeling? Because a lot of times we're so trained and so used to asking everyone else, how are you, right? But how often do we ask ourselves that very same question? And I would say that is the best place to begin, is to ask yourself daily, how am I doing today?
What if they get an answer that's not quite what they want? Maybe it's like, I feel like I'm doing lousy, or today's not going so well. How can they move themselves to a better emotional spot?
Of course. So let's say most people are probably stressed, right? Stress is, we're living in a very kind of high stress society. Survival, right? Fight or flight. I would say the best place is to focus on your breathing. If you can just do 5 minutes of slow breathing, where you inhale on the count of 6 and exhale on the count of 6, that is probably one of the best places to go into a neutral state where you're no longer impacted. You're disengaging from your negative thought patterns.
That's such great advice, because I think all of us kind of get in that place unless we're actively working to retrain our brain.
Yes. And it's also I would say it's difficult to switch immediately into a positive state if you're frustrated, angry, stressed. So it's very important to remember that the best place to be is a state of neutrality, because it's from that place, when you're no longer stressed, that you can make really good decisions.
Well, you, in your book, you address detoxing the body. Why would we do that? Why is that so important?
Detoxifying from different foods that we eat, right? Because sometimes we can react to foods that we don't even know or we're not aware of. So it's important to find out what foods we're sensitive to. And then, of course, detoxification, environmental detoxification. We're constantly bombarded with environmental kind of stressors. So it's important, I go into that our skin is also our largest organ, because it's through the skin that we actually eat different, not only good things and nutrients, but we're actually eating toxins. And I found this out when I used to work in a compounding pharmacy, making custom medications for people. What I recognized is the dosing when I was compounding, let's say for hormone cream, like progesterone topical, versus oral dose was totally different. For example, orally, a patient would need 200 milligrams, let's say at bedtime, where topically it would only be 20 milligrams. And the reason that happens when we take things orally, right, it actually has to go through a digestive tract. It has to go through the GI, and then it needs to be broken down by the liver, digestive enzymes, before it gets into the bloodstream and organs. When we apply things topically, and I'm talking about creams, shampoos, any kind of products that you put on topically, almost 90% of it actually gets absorbed. And it bypasses your digestive system and it goes directly into the bloodstreams and into the organ systems. So detoxification is important, and it's important to look at the products that we're using on a daily basis. And there's a lot of research right now that is out. And of course, there's so many risk factors, and our health, the population of our health of our population is on the decline. You know, we're having so much obesity problems now. Breast cancer, testicular cancer, infertility, immune system kind of disruptors, thyroid issues, all of those things are actually linked to the environment. And it's important to kind of see what your environment is like. And that includes the products that we're using.
Well, that's so important. And you come from such a unique background that you really could see this at a completely different level than I think most people.
Yes. I mean, I was working and seeing, actually, one of the things that happened to me when I was in a compounding pharmacy that was a big wake-up call for me. I don't think I talk about it in the book. I had initially, this was in 2007 when I started working in a compounding pharmacy. I decided to order a lab test on myself. I wanted to look at my hormone panel. And the lab called me and they said, we have a concern. We've never seen numbers so high. It's almost like you're ingesting hormones in mega doses. And I was thinking, how is that possible, right? I'm eating so clean and I'm taking so many vitamins. Well, what happened was I was working in a compounding pharmacy where the filters were not changed. And as I was making the creams and the capsules, actually things were being absorbed through my skin, even though I was wearing gloves, right?
Oh, wow.
And so that actually was a big wake-up call for me in realizing how we're all impacting, how our health is impacted. And it's not necessarily rubbing products on your skin or ingesting it orally, right? It's particles in the air as well. So, of course, I had to make major changes in how I was compounding and then making sure that my body was at its optimal level in detoxification, right? My liver, my kidneys, I wanted to make sure that everything was working properly.
That must have been frightening when you first got that lab work, because here,
Well, the lab called me because I think they were freaked out.
Yeah, I was shocked as well. And that would be concern to anybody. But again, it brings such a unique perspective on how these things can be really transmitted. People don't really realize that. And in your book, you talk about things like organics and foods that we should be more aware of.
Absolutely. And there's so much already information out there through the Environmental Working Group, which they've done such a great job at researching and talking about which foods are important to buy organic and which you don't have to. And I decided to put that in my book as well, because I feel there's so much information and misinformation, and not everything has to be organic. And of course, there is a lot of studies that were done, for example, on children with attention deficit or attention hyperactivity disorders that had high load of toxins in their system. And then they looked at them after they switched to a more organic diet. And of course, their behavioral patterns have changed drastically. So it's important to be aware of the products that we ingest, that we apply, the air that we breathe. Of course, we can't block everything. We're living in this really kind of complicated day and age where we're bombarded with so many toxins. But it is important to be aware.
Without a doubt. And there's some things that people can take proactive steps towards. Yes. One of the things you talk about in your book is doing a detox for heavy metals. And I think a lot of people are still not really aware that that's something we should be aware of.
Yes. And one thing I do want to mention is, actually, I was just in Greece, and I worked on this woman who had very high mercury toxicity, and she has various, specific symptoms. And I asked her, I said, how is it that you have such high levels? And she said, well, I decided to become pescatarian. I guess she was only eating fish, and she became really ill. So I would say detoxification, there's so many different ways of detoxifying. Of course, you want to make sure you're doing it under the supervision of somebody who's really well trained. So you want to have a doctor that's trained. You want to make sure that you test your levels first. But there's other ways to detoxify, right? And that would be, I always talk about infrared saunas, which are great, could be used 2 to 3 times a week. And it's also very important to hydrate yourself if you're doing that, because you're going to sweat out a lot. And, so that's one of the best ways to detoxify. But there's, of course, other ways that your medical provider can support you on as well.
Well, I found your book to be a great resource for people to get information on that and just different ways that they can also detox from. And you mentioned using sound as one way that people can do this as well.
Yes. So, my approach is always, of course, holistic. It's mind, body, and soul. And, let's say you have issues with your skin, or let's say you're having issues with your digestion. There's very specific ancient techniques that are so beneficial and can be used. And those, of course, are using color light and breathing techniques to detoxify organs.
Now, you got to love that, because that really is something that's pretty ancient that a lot of people don't know about, and yet you talk about it in your book.
Yes. I found through the years, also one of the best ways to, for example, combat stress is through breathing techniques. So not only slowing down your breath, but there's other techniques we can do, like alternate nostril breathing that I talk about in the book, that is incredibly powerful within minutes, shutting off your brain from stress response to balance, where you go into alpha state, which is where your right and left side of the brain are synchronized and you can make clear decisions.
Well, in your book, you talk about the anatomy of our soul, and I'd love for you to expand on that for our listeners.
Oh, wow, it's such a big topic because it's already actually changed since I published the book. But let's dive into it, because so many people talk about chakras, which I think are very important. Chakras it's an ancient term for wheel of light, right? I call it the soul anatomy doorways. So it's sort of like your antennas that communicate to the world, to the external world, information about you. This is how we transfer information in different frequencies and different color lights. And then information also enters through those wheels, through those antennas, back into your system, right? So this is how, for example, when you walk into a room and you get this intuitive feeling, right? Before you speak to anyone, if a place feels good or bad, right? So the reason that you have this knowing is because you have something much greater than you, which is your greatest you, through your soul anatomy doorways or chakras. So I feel over the years that it's very important to understand what they are, because, the science studied, the traditional medicine has studied the anatomy of our body, right? But the anatomy of the soul has not been really studied much. And I feel that this is actually the future where medicine is headed, because it's a combination of it all. The soul anatomy doorways are actually linked to very specific emotions in our body. They're linked to very specific frequencies, to the way we communicate, we expand, we grow, and also to very specific organ systems. So therefore, I believe it's important for every single person to know, of course, where their toes and fingers are, right? The same way they need to understand where those doorways are and what they're responsible for in order to have a really balanced health.
And that's so important. You address something that, like most people never even talk of. They may talk about the body and the emotions, but they never really address the whole soul spiritual aspect.
Yes.
So I know in your book you have a section where I actually really appreciate this. It talks about colors and some of the qualities and the affirmations that go with this. Why is that connection so important?
Well, information in light frequency. And it's important to understand, first of all, we're energy beings, right? So what does it mean? Actually, 99.999% of the universes, right, is made out of unseen particles. It's energy. And what holds this energy together is, and how the information travels is through the frequency of light. So if you can imagine, let's say that everything that we do, everything that happens in our physicality is actually encoded and imprinted in light frequencies. And this is the future I also feel that science is going to begin to look into. I've used light color therapy over the last, I would say, 10 years in my practice. And I find it extremely helpful and important for people. And this is something people can do on their own at home. For example, with children who have issues with focus, right? Or inability to focus. For example, yellow would be a great light, color light to use on their big toe. Also on their third eye. That helps with focus. So I go into all these different things in the book because I find that it's important to understand it. It's also important to know that there's something that we can do, and it's so simple. Whether you have a light wand or not, and I talk about, I believe, one company that you can order from Switzerland, which I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just wanted to bring this information to people. But just visualizing the color is really helpful as well.
Well, and I love how that all comes together. Those affirmations really help people become seated in more of a kind of an appreciative energy as opposed to kind of being stuck in some of the negative emotions.
Yes. It's important to, I feel, empower each human being with the knowledge that they already have all of this. It's more of a reminder and that we're not victims. There's something each and every one of us can do on a daily basis to prevent a lot of the things that occur if we are stuck in the negative kind of destructive patterns.
Yeah, because we're all looking to have a life of harmony. Yes. And your book, Holistic Wisdom, really helps people to get to that place where we're feeling more harmonious with the world around us.
Absolutely.
Well, and you touched on a section in your book that I was really delighted to see when we talk about sacred geometry. Why was that important for you to add to this book?
I work with sacred geometry symbols, and it actually didn't occur to me until probably 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, when I began to realize that everything in this universe is actually mathematically kind of designed, right? And it all stems from very specific symbols, and each symbol represents and has a very powerful effect. And I thought, well, not everyone has perhaps crystals around or can have it, around their houses, but by providing those symbols, we can actually visualize them and bring them into our awareness to also support the healing process that needs to happen within ourselves. So I believe that sacred geometry actually is harmonizing, balancing, and healing.
Well, I love how you use it not only in your book, because you have the flower of life that's listed there, but also I see it all over your website and different other things that you use. And it really is kind of, you look at it, it's kind of a relaxing, gives you like a relaxing feel when you see it.
Yes, it's definitely linked to something familiar to each and every one of us across every culture, across the globe. And, all of the things that I write about have nothing to do with religion. This is really who we are. And this is an important point to remember, is to be open. Whatever path you choose to have, it's really about embracing it all and allowing for the divinity truly to flow through us. And because this is who we are by nature.
Well, when we bring all of this together, as you have in your book and in our discussion, you can see how all this is interwoven. So one piece, when we talk about gut health, we're talking about sacred geometry, all of it comes together to bring about such a, as we talk about your book, Holistic Wisdom.
Well, it all ties together to really have people or have the understanding that we cannot treat the body alone, just like we cannot just focus on our spirituality and we cannot just focus on our mind. The future and where we are standing today as humanity, right, as each and every one of us, it's really about having a holistic approach, which is body, mind, and soul. Everything is one. There's nothing separate. It's sort of like saying, I'm going to treat your toe when you have a heart condition. Well, you have to really look at the entire person of why there's issues in the toe and perhaps why you're having a heart condition. But understanding that everything is connected and there's nothing that is separate in this existence without really not just ourselves, but we're all connected. So when one person begins to heal, we're ultimately healing the planet and we're healing the humanity. So it's crucial for us to take care of ourselves, to have the emotional hygiene, which I believe is crucial, and to really stay open, curious, and connected to ourselves in order to heal the humanity.
Well, what a beautiful note to end this discussion on. Elena, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Yes, thank you for asking. Wholistic.com with a W. And actually today is a very important day. I'm launching my online course. So Holistic Wisdom Awakening Your Inner Healer is an 8-week online course. I decided to make it happen for people where I'm there for them every step of the way in making such a big difference in their lives.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Elena, it's been such an honor to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Holistic Wisdom. If you'd like to connect with Elena, you can at wholistic.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.